All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the webinar today. I am Erin Steva, Midwest Director of Young Invincibles, and I will be sharing best practices on being a mentor in a youth apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship program. And this is my first webinar, so if I do a couple of missteps along the way, please bear with me, but I have been trained and don't anticipate any problems. All right, so today's agenda, we will do a few things. We will describe the young people that you're working with, including outlining the stage of development that they're in and providing some context on the life challenges that they may be facing. We will be describing mentors' responsibilities, providing some tips and tricks in that space. And then we will end with some time for questions and provide an overview of additional recruitment resources that we have made available. Overall, our goal today is to shed some light on young adults, how to be a mentor in your youth apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship program. We anticipate that this content will be most helpful for mentors, of course, but also know that supervisors of programs and supervisors of apprentices outside of a workplace setting will likely benefit from this. So a couple of housekeeping items. So we're an organization that regularly holds community forums, so it would be against my DNA to forego suggesting some ground rules, so I'm going to take a moment to do that. Here are a few that Young Invincibles often uses. Want to suggest that you firstly listen for understanding. In other words, we want you to be looking to understand the message and fight a potential urge to jump to conclusions. Secondly, we want you to ask questions, and unfortunately we do have limited time for questions, so we'll make space to get to them at the end, but along the way as questions are popping up, please make sure to note them. If for whatever reason we don't have time to get through all the questions during the webinar, Young Invincibles is available to follow up and provide additional resources and support. We also recommend that you limit distractions. I know that this might be hard if you're on your computer with your emails filling up your inbox. Do what you can to put your phones on silent and minimize that inbox so that you can focus during this space today. And I recognize that this is probably a little cheesy, but I did this in part because it's a practice that we use extensively when we work with young people, making sure that we're being clear from the start around expectations, and so suggest that this is a practice you do use in your own work. And I'll take a moment for actually a chatting exercise. Do folks on the webinar do this type of thing when they're doing, say, a training with young people? And also, are there any other ground rules that you have found work well? There's a chat to the left, so take a moment to enter something if you have any suggestions on other ground rules that should be brought into work like this. All right, I'm not seeing any, but feel free to enter them if some come to mind. So we will next get to introductions and an overview of what we're doing today. So I'm with Young Invincibles. We are a national nonprofit committed to expanding economic opportunity for young adults. We have 6 regional offices, including 1 in Chicago. Over the last 6 years, we've done extensive research on how to connect young adults to career pathways. This work has included a 2-year campaign to bring millennial-friendly apprenticeships to Illinois. For the curriculum that we are sharing with you today, we drew from Young Invincibles' extensive research. We spoke to 10 businesses that have apprenticeship programs as well as apprenticeship systems in other states. We have reached out to nearly 400 young adults and service providers that are supporting young adults. We've also talked to a range of agencies to understand barriers and best practices to working with young people. And we reviewed trainings provided by other apprenticeship programs. I'm also pleased to share that we partnered with Rhett from Public-Private Strategies. He's a co-presenter with me today. Rhett, if you're able to, could you jump on and introduce yourself and your organization?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us all today. My name is Rhett Buttle, and I am a principal and founder of Public-Private Strategies. Public-Private Strategies is a consulting firm that focuses on where the public and private sector meet. We help nonprofit associations, foundations, and governments figure out solutions around public-private solutions. And we are pleased to work with Young Invincibles on the development of some of the materials we'll be discussing today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, next up we will be providing some context on our training objectives and providing some additional context on the larger ecosystem that's brought us to do this work. So our objectives are a couple-fold. We want to be providing some context on the value of youth apprenticeships, share background on the young adults that you are working with, and describing what effective mentorship looks like. We will not be getting into any legal details. We will not be discussing funding stream requirements. So this is not an HR or program administrator focused training. All right, but enough of housekeeping. Let's get into why we are all here. Between the compliance trainings and implementation planning, it might be easy to forget what brought you to participate in this program. And what's neat is that youth apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships are great programs that are a win-win for employers, for young adults, and Illinois' economy as a whole. This is not a new activity. It's a proven strategy that connects employers with a pipeline of young people that are ready for their positions at the end of the program. Young people learn the soft skills and technical skills that they need to succeed, and they get the workplace exposure that they need to commit to your company. Ultimately, this is an activity that will help us all reduce youth unemployment and help organizations identify strong candidates for in-demand pathways. And my apologies for the slides appearing slightly differently. I will increase the zoom. Okay, great. Now, while this is a great program, many programs do have some barriers to success. And what you see here are some themes that came out of Young Invincible's extensive research. We interviewed, as I shared, 10 programs and found potential challenges for those that are providing the work-based training. This might be a business, a school, or a social service agency. Essentially, the programs that applied for the Youth NOFO funding. And what we found is many things. One, that initially it will be time-consuming to develop partnerships, to develop the onboarding process, and to develop the training curriculum. Once it's developed, then you'll have tremendous momentum. But it's important to build as much time as you can right now to build these elements out. We have found that some staff will need convincing on the value of youth apprenticeships and the value of working with young people. Many programs have found that mentors initially feel like they're babysitting. We've also found that staff will need a training like this to learn about best practices in working with young people generally, and particularly young people with no professional experience prior to something like this. We have found that recruitment can prove very difficult. A couple of reasons for this, and this is recruitment of young people. Young people generally don't know much about apprenticeships. They don't know about the wide range of benefits that come from participating in these programs. We've also found that it's difficult for young people to find out about job opportunities, and the practices traditionally used in advertising apprenticeships have not been effective in reaching young people across the state of Illinois. Another barrier that we have found is that it's difficult to keep young adults engaged and motivated. Young people are coming into these opportunities very intimidated and questioning whether they have the skills that they need to succeed. And this will lead to many not even applying for these opportunities or potentially quitting even once enrolled. And one way to overcome this barrier is to recognize exemplary behavior where it exists, recognize great behavior in order to reassure young people that they have the skills that they need to succeed. And then we finally have found that it's important to make sure that young adults have the accommodations that they need. This is things like access to transportation, childcare, even worksite gear or books. They might have trouble even accessing a computer. We encourage you all to not make assumptions about the supports that young people have. And finally, to make connections to key wraparound services such as SNAP and TANF so that young people have the life circumstances that they need to participate in these programs. So we've shared a bit with you about what apprenticeship programs are and why they matter to young people. What we'll do next is focus on the young people that you're working with, particularly the stage of maturity that they're in, and what it means for preparing them for workforce opportunities. And this is designed with the WIOA young people in mind. And we elevate these dynamics because the mentees that you're working with might be at a different age and from a different background than the staff that you typically work with. So first, your programs will be serving young adults that may span a large age range. 16 to 24 actually has a range of different developmental stages. What we're doing here is commenting on the midpoint within that range. And what you'll find is that you're working with young people who are probably largely in their adult bodies. Despite looking like adults, they're not entirely prepared for adulthood. Socially, they're looking for committed relationships. They're looking to build a community. They, at the same time, are looking to make their own decisions. They want support from adults, but in a guidance form rather than a telling them what to do position. Emotionally, they're starting to look at the bigger picture. They're looking for big picture accomplishments. They want to be treated like they are adults. And in that vein, they're looking to make future plans and set long-term goals. And these programs are a great place to lay the groundwork for that. They're also looking to create their own scheduled goals and work plans to achieve those goals. Now, what that means is some things that are very apparent. You should, of course, not be commenting on the apprentices' physical development. You should be creating opportunities for them to plan out their goals and their work plan and then to carry out that work plan. Create leadership opportunities for them. This might include letting them be spokespeople where they can reflect on their accomplishments. Young people are really great ambassadors, recruiting others to do this work. You'll want to also create spaces where they can be acting as advisors, participating in decision-making groups, and giving them specific roles within that. Essentially, you're looking for manageable leadership opportunities and creating space for young people to influence not only their own work, but also the work of the larger workplace setting. And here we comment on a range of life circumstances that will impact their ability to succeed on the job. Many of these circumstances have existed across generations. Some of these are new circumstances and challenges. So as you might anticipate, some young people will have really tough home lives. They might face violence. They might see peers using substances. They might be living in poverty. This could make it difficult to secure food. They might not have stable housing. It might be difficult to get the gear that they need for the job. We also know that technology is a new dynamic. Nearly 90% of young adults are on Facebook. And this can be great. It can help them connect to opportunities. Nearly half of young people actually use social media to look for employment opportunities. But it can also increase peer pressure, and it can result in cyberbullying. This phase of development is also a key time when young adults are first grappling with mental health issues. They won't use the term mental health. They'll say things like, I'm feeling stressed or sad. But it is a dynamic to be looking out for. And we also know that they'll be facing peer pressure, not only through social media, but even things like in the workplace setting. And generally, we hope that you consider this a reminder that we should all get to know the young people that we are working with and consider the specific challenges in their background and what that means for your work with them. My apologies for that unexpected advancing of the slides. Here we comment on work that Young Invincibles has done and the particular dynamics that pop up in apprenticeships. So as I mentioned earlier, we've spoken to 400 young adults and service providers and found the following dynamics, coming from specifically the mouths of young people. Young adults are really concerned about whether or not they will have the life circumstances that they need to succeed. They question whether they will be able to balance something like an apprenticeship program with their other life responsibilities. They themselves are concerned about having the accommodations like childcare and transportation that they need to participate. We also found that young people are really intimidated. While they're excited once they learn more about apprenticeships, many are questioning whether they have the skills that they need to succeed. They're concerned about fitting into the work culture. They want to be treated as equals. They want to be welcomed. And they raised up how critical it was to them to have a trusted person that they could turn to with questions, someone, an advocate of sorts who they can trust to be in their corner. We also found that they were motivated by a wide range of things that come with apprenticeships. They're excited to develop in-demand skills. They want to be working towards a career, and they want to be earning wages and getting access to a stable workplace. And what this means altogether is that we should be looking to create programs that have comprehensive wraparound supports and holistic training in welcoming workplaces. And mentors can play an outsized role in providing these elements. So with that in mind, I'll turn this over to Rhett to talk through what it means to be a mentor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erin. Erin covered sort of our introduction overview and really trying to help folks sort of understand the population that we're dealing with. What I wanted to talk a little bit about today was what exactly being a mentor means and some of the ideas and tips behind how to be an effective mentor and how you potentially as a mentor might view yourself and think about sort of the relationship that you're going to be forming with many of the youth that you could be working with. So I think just broadly, mentoring is really a long-term relationship. A lot of folks think, that there's sort of a date set, and obviously some of the programs may be focused by dates, but a lot of the relationships that are built are like the relationships that you build at work, in the workplace, or even outside the workplace. And so really we encourage you to think about this as a longer-term relationship that is focused on both growth and development of the mentee. Some of the general things and the general qualifications that mentors should be thinking about and be open to is obviously the idea of accessibility. Working particularly with youth in this circumstance will require our mentor who is very open and very accessible often. It's important to obviously think about how you can be open, how you can be patient, and at the same time, while you're doing all of those things, you have to think about how you can help grow the relationship with your mentee. And so you have to think about how to set limits and also help build their skills that they're hoping to get from this experience. Some of the roles that you may encounter as you think about this is the role of teacher or trainer and in helping to develop a new set of skills. Part of it is modeling a positive attitude and what is sort of the appropriate way to approach sort of difficult situations. Thinking about both hard and soft skills. I think often we focus on sort of, what are the hard skills people are going to get out of these experiences, but it's really important to remember that you are a model of soft skills as well, and some folks who you may be encountering through this process have never ever had the experience of working or learning from someone in a soft skilled environment or in the way that maybe they can do from you. You'll play the role of guide, which is helping to figure things out and tackle problems, providing encouragement, but also an advocate, and because there will be cases of which you will be representing your mentees and in the room and making decisions. And so it's important that you think about all of these things. And then also how you can be a confidant, and I think there are often important conversations and sensitive conversations that potentially can be shared, and so this is an important part of being a mentor and thinking about your role as a mentor. So moving to the next slide, which is really focused on thinking about sort of mentor process and sort of main tasks, we've really sort of tried to structure this in 3 big areas for you, which is, familiarization and testing. And, don't want it to be overly mechanic, but that's sort of, phase 1. Phase 2 is really the commitment and sort of work phase. And then the last is, how do you close out or sort of terminate the relationship? And then, a lot of these relationships, obviously, there may never be a termination. A lot of folks will go on to continue to have relationships that extend beyond, formal programs. But at the same time, it's important to make sure that as you're finishing sort of the formal side of things, that it's terminated in the right way. So a little bit on familiarization and testing. This is really, the stage of getting to know, getting better to understand, to know your mentee, better understanding how they communicate, the beginning of sort of answering questions and really listening for how they respond. This is also the phase where you have to help develop a lot of those soft skills and also answer some of the questions, things that may be everyday suspect to you and I, like, this is the time everyone arrives at the office. These are the times that we expect you to be here. Thinking through how you can sort of set the expectations and sort of uphold those expectations, but at the same time create a culture of support and identify activities that you and the mentee are interested in. And then the important piece here is the testing piece, which is, as with any new relationship, to begin to test how you work with your mentee and what are sort of the expectations that you've put in place that sort of the mentee quickly understands, but also some of the expectations that you may need to figure out how to either A, better communicate or work through with the mentee. Moving into the next phase, which is really the sort of commitment and work, this is really the deepening of the relationship with the mentee, and so it's really important in this phase to you try to continue to monitor sort of the behavior you're seeing with the mentee. Some of, this is the phase where you hope some of the kinks in the beginning parts of the familiarization and testing that have been worked out, but you're also hoping that that through that workout you may discover other things, and so you may see some additional things pop up as you're working through this. This is where goal setting is really important and sort of giving that long-term vision. So, the first phase is really focused on what are the immediate things that you need to know to be successful. The commitment and work phase is a little more focused on sort of the goal setting phase. And then lastly, thinking about how to really bring the relationship to a close. We hope that all of these relationships obviously end in a positive way, and the vast majority of them will. There may be the case where it does not work out, and so being really focused on using this as an opportunity to learn. And we can dive more into this into the Q&A, but just wanted to make sure to sort of bring that piece up as you're thinking through it. So as we move on from sort of the mentor process and main task, wanted to just quickly cover some sort of mentor guidelines that could be helpful. And so I think the best place to start is obviously thinking about, when you're meeting your mentee. Some of the things that we've suggested that we found has been successful through the research are, meeting with key professionals involved with your mentees. So obviously you are one relationship that your mentee is going to have, but they're going to encounter a lot of other key professional relationships, and this is part of the experience. It's really helpful to identify other folks who are going to be influencers on the mentees and making sure that you're also providing them with the context and giving them the support that they need to make sure that the mentee is successful. Also, many programs will have a program coordinator. It's really important to keep this person in the loop throughout the process. This person, while they may be juggling many balls or many mentees that are going through one program, it's important that you make sure that this person is kept up to date on your sort of progress with the mentee. They can potentially be helpful to working out any conflict that you might be having. But more importantly, you really want to make sure that they're sort of tracking the process to make sure that both you, your mentee, and the organization are leading towards a successful program. One of the things you may consider, not necessarily appropriate in every situation, but is connecting with the mentee's parents. A lot of times we find that the mentee's parents can significantly benefit, but at the same time, it's important to have them invested in the success of your mentee for the program to really work. At the bottom, we've put some suggested ideas around maybe an outing with your mentee for those of you who may be comfortable with that, so something to think about. Moving on to thinking through sort of that second phase, as we talked about, which is the goal setting. So after meeting your mentee, sort of phase 2. As you're thinking through how to set goals, some things to sort of keep in mind, making them measurable, making sure the goals are challenging. Obviously, realism is really important, and then being very specific, and of course, setting a timetable that makes sense for both you, the mentee, and the organization in which you're supporting. Some things we suggest as steps or a way to do that is, one, sort of selecting 1 or 2 goals to work on. Help your mentees sort of in the beginning see that these goals are realistic, see that they're achievable, making them sort of, build confidence in themselves, as well as sort of allowing you the time to develop a relationship with them. Discuss, with their parents or with the other influence we talked about how they see the goals and how they can help support the mentee to sort of reach the goals. Another great step and tactic is obviously brainstorming if you have some level of flexibility. So brainstorming together about how you're going to reach the goals, what are the tactics, what are the ideas, what's the overall strategy, really making them feel a part of the process and teaching them some of those both hard and soft skills that we've talked about. Identifying steps for reaching the goal and really being clear about what that is, and making sure that you are recognizing sort of, that the mentee does have capabilities, and while there are a lot of things that they're going to learn through this process, there are a lot of inherent skills that they're also bringing. Working to sort of, pre-think about what are the obstacles and challenges and helping them to think through the strategy behind that. And then the last is deciding a timeline for accomplishing and evaluating the goals, and making sure that the process doesn't necessarily drag on, and that there's evaluation criteria so that you both are sort of on the same level about how you think about success. Another piece as we think about moving through the process, setting and managing expectations. So making sure that you discuss and you agree on what you expect from each other. This is obviously, like any relationship, a relationship of mutual respect. And then also getting a real good sense of what expectations the mentee has of you and vice versa, and being really clear with them about what that is, because for some mentees, they may not know how you're thinking about or how you're coming at that, and so we suggest you think about that. On the managing expectation side, a few things that I'd suggest you think through are, setting up meetings, touch points, weekly touch bases, checking in, and these can maybe slow down as the relationship pursues, but obviously very helpful in the beginning, as you would do potentially with onboarding any new staff. Thinking about how to develop an evaluation criteria, maybe it's monthly, it's quarterly. Again, this may be this may be a tactic that you use that in the beginning you do more frequently, and then as sort of success builds and you move on, you think about maybe putting the barrier in between the time that you do it less frequently, and as you build more trust, and that'll make the mentee feel good about it too. And then obviously just thinking about your overall onboarding process, and for those of you who are coming at this from an HR perspective, although to be clear, this is not an HR presentation, many of the things that you've done through the onboarding may be applicable in this situation, and may be helpful sort of tools and resources that you've already created that can be helpful to the mentee.
Great, thank you. And I can take it here for a moment.
Awesome.
Really helpful. So now that you've set goals and you've set clear expectations, you may find yourself in a situation where you need to problem solve. And let me just make sure to bring the slides into alignment. There we go. Now, even when you set clear expectations, we should expect that issues will come up. And we know that problem solving is challenging, regardless of who you're working with. But it's particularly hard when you're newly establishing a relationship. And while it is not fun, issues snowball. So The most critical thing is that you address issues as early as possible. And here are 5 steps on how to do that well. First and foremost, make sure to take a step back. The conversation will go much better if you're in a calm place and you have taken the time to think the conversation through. This is also a great practice to role model for your mentee. And we'll teach them ways to troubleshoot as issues arise. The second step is where you are initiating conversation. And when you go into this conversation, you should have already thought through steps 2 through 5. We recommend when you sit down for this conversation that you firstly stick to the facts, state what you saw. You should give 1 or more examples that support your feedback. This should be something that's objective. Ideally, it's linked to even a date. You should state the impact of the behavior that you saw, describe what the impact is on you or others at the company, and provide context on why this is a concern. When you're doing this, you should then follow up with asking questions. Questions are critical because it gives you an opportunity to understand what happened from your mentee's perspective. One example of how this might go is, I was surprised when you showed up late when we had discussed the start time of 9 a.m. And we had even talked about how you should give me a notification or a call if you would be more than 5 minutes late. Yet you've been coming in past 9 a.m. 2 days in a row. What's been going on? And then this information helps you troubleshoot. During steps 3 and 4, you should be creating a set of solutions and a corrective action plan that you both feel good about. This is an opportunity to be partners in crime and creating a course correction plan. Once you've identified a positive goal, you should talk through what resources and support the mentee will need to be successful in working towards that. Resources might include a work plan. It might be creating regular check-ins on this particular action plan. It might be that you need to coordinate with other influencers, whether it's a teacher, another instructor, or a parent. And then once you've landed on the plan, identified barriers and potential solutions to those barriers, you should test out the plan and make sure to follow up regularly. This should be a part of potentially your weekly check-ins, but at a minimum you should be checking in within a month. And you should be talking through not only what the problem was, comment on progress that you have or have not seen, and talk through whether the solutions that you identified, talk through how effective they are. And a tip with all of this will be that this will go well when there's clear expectations. A person will be more happy to have this conversation if they know that they are acting outside of what was expected of them. Here are some suggestions on how to be discussing delicate issues, whether it is problem solving when someone's not acting up to the expectations that you have set out for them, or other issues that might arise. There's 2 key themes. One, that you want to be putting your mentee at ease. You want to avoid making them defensive. And secondly, you want to honor where they are developmentally. These are people who are trying to work towards long-term goals. They want to be seen as adults. They're looking for guidance. So you want to the degree that you can, put them in the driver's seat and make them your partner in crime as you're working towards solutions. So a couple of best practices in these spaces when it comes to putting a mentee at ease: you should be acting calmly. This is positive role modeling. Avoid judgmental statements. Be upfront if you're upset. Also let them know what can remain confidential. That will build trust and allow them to be more honest with you. You want to create a fair amount of time for this in case it takes a while to dig through some frustration or issues that someone might be having at home that has brought them to have this challenge. And then in terms of honoring self-determination and creating them, bringing them as your partner in crime, you want to start by understanding where they're coming from. Start with what are their needs and feelings. Once you've gotten through that phase, you're in a space where you can problem solve and empower them. They may come up with solutions that don't feel appropriate, and so you need to come in with your own action plan in mind. and also probably over time you'll start to anticipate what their go-to suggestions are. And if you have a series of questions thought through in advance, you can troubleshoot with them if they're coming up with solutions and action plans that are not appropriate. All right, so now we have discussed the value of apprenticeships. We've talked through the unique traits of the young adults that you will be working with, and we've described some key mentor activities. So now we're going to go through some key considerations to bring into your work. We recommend fostering an ethical relationship. Of course, you all want to be doing ethical work generally. Here are some special considerations when it comes to working with young people who have limited professional experience. 4 key categories. You should be firstly looking out to promote the welfare and safety of your mentee. You should be within that aware of the influence and power that you have over that person's life. That dynamic might make it difficult for the young person that you work with to raise up concerns that they're facing at home. And so to the degree that you can, comment on those dynamics, and while you don't want to force someone to go there, you want to say, I recognize that these challenges might exist in your life, and if you want to, this is a space where we can talk through these things. You want to be seen by your mentee as someone who is trustworthy and responsible. The way that you achieve this is by being consistent and reliable. You want to avoid last-minute changes. You want to make sure that you're communicating clearly. Don't make any assumptions around what behavior should be. A best practice in this space is actually to ask your mentee after, say, a check-in or a performance evaluation to repeat back to you what they've heard. This is an opportunity to align around takeaways and action plans. If there's a lot that was discussed, you might want to do both a verbal report back as well as a written report back. Thirdly, we recommend that you do whatever you can to be their ally. And part of this is recognizing biases that you might bring into this. Even things around what it means to, say, work with a millennial. That's a really loaded term right now, and a lot of people presume that all millennials are social media addicts that have no sense of responsibility. Perhaps that is not the mindset that you're bringing into this work, but we suggest that you create some space to recognize and explore what are biases that you might have. These biases will impact your ability to show respect and be sensitive to the dynamics that the young people that you have are working with. And the 4th category is around creating boundaries and using discretion. It's a tough balancing act where you're looking to understand the background of the young people that you're working with and how that influences their ability to be successful on the job. As you're creating that relationship, you may find yourself getting some sensitive information. One dynamic with this is that you should be cautious with who you're sharing that information with. If it gets into a place where you're hearing information that doesn't feel appropriate, that's something to flag as early as possible. It might be a place where you want to bring in other folks, like, say, from the HR department. You may have to say things like, these are the hours within which you should be calling or texting me, and here's the nature of the information that you should be sharing with me. And here are some cultural sensitivities to be aware of. You're likely going to be working with young people from a wide range of backgrounds, and this has profound implications for what your work with them will look like. Here are 3 dynamics to consider. When it comes to racial and ethnic diversity, we encourage you to use this as an opportunity to get to know your mentor's culture. Early on, as you're getting to know them, you might want to ask about their racial and ethnic identity, what sort of traditions that means for their family life. And we encourage this in part because that's just a great relationship building activity, but also it has an influence on how they view authority. It might influence their communication styles, perspectives on time, and how they've been brought up to handle conflict. And the more that you learn about this, the more it will prepare you for dynamics that you'll encounter. And it will be things that you'll want to bring into the expectation setting process. We also want you to recognize that the young people you work with may come from a wide range of socioeconomic circumstances. They may be living very differently from you, might be housing quarters that are overcrowded. They might live in a tough neighborhood. They may not necessarily have access to a phone or even a computer or the internet. It's not your job to rescue your mentee from their circumstances, but you are in a great position to help them troubleshoot those circumstances and connect them to other resources that can help them become more independent. And then finally, going back to this theme around stereotypes with millennials, you're working with a set of young people. And while we think of millennials as this particularly troublesome group, it is certainly the case that from generation to generation, adults have viewed the next generation as more troublesome than they were at that age. While there might be some particular dynamics that are unique here, say the fact that young people are increasingly on social media and on smartphones, in many ways they're just like you were when you were at their age. To the degree that you're coming across, say, appearance or language dynamics that are something you're uncomfortable with, one piece of that is getting to know them and understanding whether that is a reflection of the neighborhood or ethnic identity that they have. And then within that, taking space to say, let's troubleshoot what I'm expecting and what you're used to, and using that as an opportunity to get to know them, but also creating expectations that you're both comfortable with. This is also a space where your own prejudices may come in, and it's important to create, as we've mentioned before, that space to reflect on how your biases or expectations of a young person, say, are influencing the way that you're working with them. We nextly recommend that you create a warm environment with the wraparound services and holistic upskill training opportunities that young people need to succeed. I'll dig into these each a bit more. So when it comes to wraparound services, as we mentioned earlier, young people are facing a wide range of challenges that will make it difficult for them to enroll and complete these programs. We suggest that early on during the intake process, you're getting to know who they are and the life circumstances that they have, and as quickly as possible be connecting them to social services, things like SNAP and TANF. Young Invincibles and Ed Systems, another group that's providing technical assistance, can be helpful in this space. We also want to comment on the fact that apprenticeships are a unique opportunity to identify preparation gaps that may prevent a young person from being successful in an education or professional setting. You want to be thinking through a range of soft skills, so this is things like ability to manage time, work in a group, ability to process feedback, as well as technical skills. Maybe it's Microsoft, maybe it's things related to math and literacy. So creating a series of experiences that perhaps the worksite is not providing, but other partners are, and creating a few different experiences where young people can be addressing those gaps in their skill set. These types of the wraparound services and the holistically upskilling young people, these are things that perhaps the mentors can be advocates on. They may not be the best positioned people to provide all of these pieces, but rather should be working with other program administrators to make this possible. We also recommend, and this is something a mentor can do a lot with, providing a youth-centered, welcoming environment. As we mentioned earlier, young people are really intimidated by this opportunity. They're excited, they want to be developing those in-demand skills, they want to be outside the classroom, but they are concerned around whether or not they will be welcomed and considered part of the team. So a couple of things that you can do in this space. One is comment on growth, recognize good behavior where it happens. This regular recognition of growth and development will reassure young people that they're on the right track and that they have the skills that they need to succeed. We also want, secondly, for young people to meet a wide range of their coworkers. If there's other apprentices, they should also be meeting them, and there should be space to get to know them informally and formally. The more that they know others within the workplace, the more that they will feel like they're a part of the team, and they'll feel more comfortable approaching others to ask questions and to learn more about the work that they do. So this should be built into the onboarding process, but also be a part of the 3 stages of the mentorship relationship. And you, as a mentor, can play a big role in educating both the mentee and other coworkers on what this relationship can look like. You can share the importance of setting boundaries, of making sure the workspace is safe. Of course, everyone who's a professional there will be people that the mentee or apprentice are modeling themselves after. And so you want to make that dynamic clear to everyone in the workplace. And ultimately, we hope that you're being an advocate for the apprentices that you're working with, showing and leading by example for others within your workplace about the value that these young people have to your organization. I am going to hand it back over to Rhett to talk through some top recommendations. Don't want to bore you with just hearing my voice, so we'll transition over to Rhett for a little bit here.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. And I'm just going to cover 2 slides very quickly. So just some quick ideas and top recommendations for you to consider. We know we've hit you with a lot of information, and we're looking forward to taking some question and answer. But just thinking through some top recommendations on these 2 slides that may help you sort of with the takeaways from today. First, really important to obviously understand that many of your mentees may be reluctant to trust. And so what are some things that you can do? You can be available, suggest ways to solve problems, offer reassurance and support, and really important to not force personal issues with your mentee. These are all sort of key things that we found sort of bear out through the research are great ways to establish a relationship with your mentee and sort of stay in the appropriate lane and give them sort of the best growth experience possible. Looking at the next slide on top recommendations, also really important that you're in the right mindset and that you've established realistic expectations for both the mentee and for yourself. This opportunity can be incredibly profound for both you and the mentee, but making sure those expectations are in place are really important. Also making sure that you have a good idea of what your mentee's interests are. And finding ways to relate to your mentee. And then lastly, any work that you're able to do to try to better put yourself in the shoes of your mentee is always something that will make you a better mentor and make your relationship more successful. So quickly back to Erin to wrap up a few slides, and then we look forward to taking some questions.
Great, thank you. In case you're a visual person like myself, we mapped out a couple of themes that map back to everything that Rhett was just sharing and things earlier on. So make sure that you're being reliable and consistent. You want to be putting your mentee's needs and safety at the forefront of your mind. Look for opportunities to respect and embrace cultural differences. Remember to regularly comment on growth. You want to be including your mentee as you're developing their work plan and creating leadership opportunities for them. You want to ask a lot of questions and set up other people who are working with this apprentice so that you can be working together to address difficult situations. And so we've created, and we'll end on what we're calling a mentor map. And this puts together the 3 key phases, objectives that you should be holding in your mind, and key activities to lead during this phase. The time frame on each of these phases will vary based on the length of your program, but you do want to intentionally build in these three phases and these objectives and activities into your work, whether this is a 1-month program or a 1.5-year program. So just to walk through a couple of key categories, when you first get to meet the apprentice, you're You're getting to know one another. The apprentice might be testing their relationship with you. You're learning what one another's work styles are and how to complement one another. Before the apprentice gets to the work site, you want to prepare yourself and your organization to work with them. This means doing a review of the background. Ideally, there's some sense of what their preparation gaps are. You want to be meeting with other key professionals that are influencing that apprentice's work. And you want to be preparing your coworkers and getting them actually really excited to be working with this person and emphasizing why they need to be making themselves available and aiming to altogether create a welcoming environment. Once the apprentice arrives at the work site, you want to have a formal onboarding process. This is creating a foundation for your relationship and also setting them up to interact with you, other apprentices, and others within the organization. During this time, there should be an orientation. There should be paperwork that includes some of those foundational expectations. And this would be a great opportunity to do that sort of social outing where you can get to know one another outside of a professional setting. During the second stage, you're deepening the relationship and setting the young person up to learn the skills that they should be learning for this job. And so as a part of this, you're setting goals. Of course, each apprenticeship will have a wide range of formal goals that might include learning a industry-recognized credential. But this would be an opportunity to flesh out, say, soft skills that they also want to be working towards. Perhaps there's other career tracks within your workplace that they want to learn about. This would be an opportunity to explore all of that. You want to be creating a calendar. This calendar should include what the weekly touch points are with your apprentice. It should include a initial onboarding step backs. Often this is 90 days. Depending on the length of your program, 90 days might be too far out. And throughout this period, you want to be doing all of the items that you see in that red bar below. So problem solving, discussing delicate issues. As we've mentioned earlier, challenges and problems will snowball, so make sure that as soon as possible you're identifying them and talking them through. As you're raising up these issues, make sure you're being aware of cultural sensitivities, socioeconomic status, and how that might influence a person's work. And then there's a closure period where you're setting a young person up to transition out of this work. Ideally, this is setting them up for another opportunity that you've already identified. This transition should be discussed well in advance and ideally as part of a comprehensive series of steps that helps them work towards their career goals. And during this phase, there's probably a lot of administrative paperwork that you should be filling out. So that concludes our presentation on dynamics to think about when it comes to the young people that you will be working with and what it means to be a mentor. In a moment, we'll shift to other resources that we have available, but what we want to do now is open it up for questions that those of you on the webinar have. And Natasha, I'm going to turn to you for what the mechanics of this look like, but I imagine people can share questions in the chat bar.
Yes, that would be correct. If I could type them in the chat.
Okay, perfect. We'll give it just one more minute. All right, if there are no questions at this time, I'll shift to other materials and resources that Young Invincibles and other partners are providing. Natasha, is it possible to go back to that presentation?
Yeah, just one moment.
There's just one more slide I want to walk through. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to make you all aware of the fact that there are a few resources that are already made available on the partner page. So Young Invincibles has created a recruitment toolkit which talks through some tips and tricks on how to advertise to young adults. And we have a wide range of sample communications that you can be using. We talk through how to post to social media, what are key themes that you should be using. We've even created sample digital shareable materials for Facebook. We have sample Twitter posts. We strongly encourage those of you on the call who are still in the recruitment phase to do two things. One is to leverage social media. Nearly 90% of young adults are on social media and on it daily, and nearly half of them turn to social media to find out about job opportunities. We also recommend that you reach out to community institutions that are already working with the young people that you want to be bringing into your programs. This could be schools, it could be job development centers. We have a short list of key community partners and a link of where to go to find out who is available nearby, and we even provide sample titles of who you should be turning to. We also have a sample flyer that is ready for you to edit. All that you have to do is replace the picture that you see and add in information that's relevant to your position. These are materials that we've already workshopped with young people. They're in PowerPoint form, so you don't need fancy infrastructure to be able to use these materials. So we really encourage you to turn to those if you're still in that phase. You'll also see in this other resources side a word cloud. This has come out of the outreach that we've done to nearly 400 young people and service providers. These are the top themes that young people have raised as to what makes them excited about apprenticeships. Things like pay really matter. If your apprenticeship pays, we encourage you to explicitly state that. So our toolkit is around 9 pages. It is actually quite quick because it's mostly sample material, so we encourage you all to turn to it. Young Invincibles is also available for additional technical assistance. We're particularly well equipped to help with recruitment and onboarding work. We're also working with the Education Systems Center out of Northern Illinois University to do some community practice work. I know that Jennifer Foyle sent out that information over email. So this is a preview to say some materials are already available for you, but also expect additional emails from myself and others at Ed Systems because we're here to help you all be successful in your work. So feel free to share any questions if you have them in the chat bar, but otherwise, if not, we will close this in a minute or two. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Looking forward to working with you and learning more about the work that you're doing in the field.
Thank you.